Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film Terminator 2 Judgment Day. All right, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Terminator 2?
Sure. A cyborg, identical to the one who failed to kill Sarah Connor, must now protect her 10-year-old son, John, from an even more advanced and powerful cyborg.
Wow. I didn't realize that they had that little twist in the IMDb summary or perhaps the trailers.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right?
See, that was fun for me to discover while watching the movie. Well, we've always known that trailers often ruin a lot, a large portion of the movie's reveals.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so let's start off with our one-sentence summaries for Terminator 2.
My summary is, he came back.
Nice.
Thank you.
The 3-word one-sentence summaries. I'm adding that to my little collection that I have. I love it. My one-sentence summary is James Cameron says, "Make me a sequel? No problema, dickwads."
Well done.
All right. So here we are reviewing the second installment in the Terminator series. You know, we loved the first one so much that we just couldn't stop. We were like, here we are in the spring pre-summer blockbuster, kind of dead space with movie releases. Let's do this movie that we've been intrigued about, that we've heard great things about. So here we are reviewing Terminator 2. Let's start off with your initial thoughts about Terminator 2. And it's come out many decades ago at this point, but we won't spoil too much yet, and we'll have a spoiler section. All right, Sarah, what did you think about Terminator 2? How does it compare to the first one?
I think I'm in the minority that enjoyed the first one better than the second one.
Oh, I did too, honestly.
Oh,
I'm intrigued to hear why
great.
for you, though.
Whew, I feel so much better. I think for me, one of the things that I struggle with is in movies when one person, or in this case, cyborg, is like too powerful, then it becomes uninteresting. And so one thing that I really wanted in this, and we got this a little bit in the first one, where we knew the Terminator's weakness. We knew that he was very powerful, but at least there were some things that they could try to take him out. In this one, it was just like, oh, this dude is real powerful. And that's it. And so I really struggled throughout the entire thing of like, how are you going to take this dude down? Because you just keep shooting at it with various guns and none of that works. When are we going to try something else? Also, if the Arnold Terminator was sent from the future, why didn't he have intel on how to beat this other evil Terminator now that you're a good Terminator? Like, I had some issues with like that mechanic of it. And I think
I love that your brain goes here.
I was so bothered. Anytime they'd bring out a gun, I was like, you freaking idiots, let's do something else. Like, the guns have not worked for the last 2 hours. Why are you still shooting a gun at the Terminator? I don't understand. And I get it. It's the only weapon you have, so it's that or nothing. But like, let's do something else. Let's get creative here, people. I don't know. I struggled.
This is something that I think some of the other, big action franchises like Jurassic Park does really well, which is that fundamentally it begins to learn about its foes and then can use that against it. One of the reasons why the movie Prey was so exciting is that we got to learn about how the predator operates, and then our main protagonist, she can use that against him. we didn't get that here. I had the same question as you throughout most of this movie, which is, man, how are we going to overcome this one? Like, I know
Yeah.
nothing about how it's wired, how the oozing of the metals work and all this kind of stuff. And I think we wanted this to be a process movie, which maybe says more about you and
Yes.
I more than
Yep.
anything else.
Absolutely.
Um, but I love that you got fixated on that because I was wondering how they were going to write themselves into this ending. Because we get an exciting third act finale climax sequence in the first Terminator. It's exciting, like they don't necessarily, it's not a process movie at all, but they use this creative set piece to really de- overcome and take out the Terminator the first time around. This one, I think the fact that the climax is pretty weak in this movie, that third act, is what makes this movie far less compelling compared to the first one. For most of the middle section, I'm like, all right, I'm tracking with this. I'm down for a good cat and mouse sequence. But it's that third act that really doesn't take it home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I also struggled with, and again, this is one of those that says more about me than the movie, but
I love
I
the scenarios.
I know. I struggle with the cat and mouse thing after a while.
Oh. Mm.
I want the protagonist to at some point go on offense. Like that's what I want
Mm.
in the movie, or I want the protagonist to be working toward something other than just survival, which again is a me issue, not a the movie issue. But I that was one thing that I really struggled with in this movie was like what what are we doing? Like what are we trying to accomplish
Mm.
here?
Mhm.
And I appreciate that we do go on some detours, and Sarah Connor tries to go on offense in some respects. And we could talk about that once we get into spoiler territory. But I wanted, I think, a little bit more of that than this movie was willing to give me. But that's a me issue.
I don't think I it might be partially a you show, but it is the challenge of doing a sequel because, like you mentioned, one of the things that we praised about the first Terminator is how fun it was that it's just a simple cat and mouse story. Like there was such a thrill in seeing the Terminator chase these people that don't know what's going on, that is learning about this larger prophecy and the future that's going to unfold. Like it works for the first movie. That doesn't necessarily work for the second movie because we've seen that already. One of the things that I actually had jotted down here that I appreciate about this movie as a sequel is that it didn't try to do too much. I think the other risk of a sequel is that it tries to do so much world building, and this movie doesn't really shoot for any of that. It's very much in line in tone and structure even to the first movie. And I love a little bit of the restraint in that, but I do think that the law of diminishing return results in this being just not as exciting as the first one. And I wonder, there's this like really delicate balance between building out this world and the characters and complicating some of that because it's interesting and exciting for us as a sequel, um, versus doing too much of it. So it's in general, it's tough, man. It's tough to make a sequel. This
Oh
movie
yeah.
but this movie, I think, airs far more on the more conservative, like, formula that worked for the first movie, let's try it again for the second one, more so than most of the sequels that we see now. I think a lot of, like, follow-up installments in a franchise today try to do a lot. They, like, swing, big and go for big moves, and this movie doesn't, and I kinda love that. It's just like, "Meh, we'll just do another one of these. Another little episode."
Well, and I do wonder if that at least partially has to do with when it came out, because the
Mm,
way that movies are made today are so different. Like one movie does well, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna greenlight 4 more sequels. And it's like, "Oh my gosh, we can go
Mm,
huge because we have all of these movies to explore." And I wonder if the way that other projects were greenlit, in the 80s and 90s looked very different. And so maybe they would only greenlight one movie at a time. And so you
mhm,
couldn't maybe go as big. I don't know. I'm just making things up. But I
mhm.
think time probably contributes to that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Hmm. And I think that this movie like expands the word a little bit. So it's not like it really leans into like, okay, we're just going to be another action thrill for you, another little episode. Um, there's a lot more details that we learn, but I think not as much as perhaps we would in a sequel of today, which is
Hmm.
interesting
Yeah.
dynamic.
And one thing that I did really love that this movie did is what they did with Sarah Connor's character. And you can see how after 10 years she is an entirely different person than the one that we met in the first film. And I loved that, and I thought it was so fascinating, the character choices that they made for her and for John. I thought were utterly fascinating. So like the their issues and their problems and how they're processing through this very weird life that they're both living, that to me was the most interesting part of the whole movie, which is weird because it's an action movie full of Terminators, and it was the humans that I was more interested in than anything else that was going on. But I wanted to just think more about how humans would respond if they were in this situation. If you learned that there was an apocalypse and you are raising the savior of humanity, like how would you respond? How would that warp your brain? Or if you learned as a child that you were the one who was going to save humanity in 30 years, like how would that mess you up as a kid? And I thought that the film did a really good choice in crafting Sarah Connor and John Connor the way that it did in this film.
So really, Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a character study. First and foremost, it's a character study.
Of really
Yeah.
jacked up people.
Right, that are facing
Understandably
some
so.
really jacked up truths about the future.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, this seems like a good time for us to include a spoiler alert if you haven't seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's been a few years of this being out, so we are going to spoil this movie and have full reign over some of the plot points in the ending, especially. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit more on the way that this movie handled our two out of the three main protagonists. Tell me more about your thoughts.
I love that like Sarah Connor has such a tenuous grasp on reality, and like she is far from a perfect protagonist. Like you can tell that life has not been kind to her in the last 10 years, and she's had to learn some stuff, and she's gotten herself in a lot of trouble just trying to make things happen, trying to, I don't know, protect her son, trying to defeat Skynet, and I love that we see just how fragile she is mentally, and how she is still working through that to try and protect her son, try and take down this foe, trying to survive. Like I really appreciated those choices, and I'm glad that she is so different from when we first met her, because I would imagine that going through everything she went through, like I would probably have lost some marbles along the way too. So it felt like a really smart character decision, and one that was true to the character and true to just a human being in general.
I think that's one of the things that this movie handles really well because we do build an investment in her as a character in the first movie. And this movie really builds on that. She is a totally different personality and person. Uh, the way that she's approaching her life, the choices that she makes compared to the first movie. She really is the damsel in distress in Terminator 1. And she's a total badass in this movie, which was so exciting to see. Her tenacity, her ability to take charge, the willingness she has to just go after her convictions. It's amazing. But I one of the moments that I really loved in this movie that I was like, "Oh, wow. That's a incredibly intentional character choice," is when she goes to the home of the person that created Skynet or will eventually create Skynet as it continues to evolve and grow. And she's about to kill him and she chooses not to. Like, what a character
Mhm.
defining moment. Like, with all the truth that she knows about the future and the destruction and um, the the trauma and chaos that's about to ensue, she can't bring herself to take his life. And I think that combination of this toughness and this uh, sense of conviction that she feels, but also the humanity in her, that's what makes her such an interesting character to me because she has both. And we see both that softness and that tenderness, but also this fiery conviction. We see all of that in her. And she's kind of, I mean, she's a bit of a thin character in the first movie. Let's be real.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
like she is the one getting saved. She's the one that can scream and all of the action sequences, and Reeves will do the job for her. This one, Homegirl has full autonomy. She is making choices for her life, for her son, for humanity, and that was really refreshing to see. I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, yeah, neither did I. And I'm really glad because that's what I was looking for in the first one. Like I wanted Sarah Connor to be able to contribute, and she does at the end, that final scene.
Yeah, kind of.
Um, but it wasn't until that ending part that she contributes. But this movie, man, she is just I, she's killing it. She's doing a great
Mhm.
job.
Mhm.
And I loved that scene at the Dyson's home where
She can't do it.
she can't do it, and like you can see the look of horror on her face of like, wow, like I was going to try and kill this person, and she's like
Yeah.
horrified about that, but also maybe horrified about the decision to like allow him to live and knowing what will be created.
Yes.
Like it was such this complex fusion of emotions that she was expressing throughout that whole scene, and it was great. Linda Hamilton does an absolutely great job in this film.
That's one of the interesting thing that this movie doesn't fully dive into, but begins to invite in, which is this morality around like basically like utilitarianism versus kantism. Like it doesn't make sense for us to take out doesn't make sense for Sarah Connor to take out that man who creates a thing that's going to obliterate the world. Like from a moral perspective, like are we rooting for her? Are we not? You know, like and that internal dialogue and tension within us is kind of interesting too. Like if you can save all of humanity from what's about to come, is it worth the risk of inviting in their cooperation with the possibility that you don't you don't complete your mission or you just take them out now? Or
Mhm.
does humanity like does the current Skynet systems and humans eventually create that anyway? Like was that worth it or not? Like all of those moral questions and that tension is somewhat invited and not fully explored, but definitely was top of mind for me. Because I'm like, man, am I rooting for her right now? Like, yeah, shoot him up. Or am I like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't take human life? And you see that with the relationship between John Connor and the Arnold Terminator, where he's like, don't like I command you not to kill anyone. And what's the cost of that? Like, is he able to protect the people he's come to protect without killing any of the cops that are coming to take him out?
Apparently, yes, because he's
He can
Arnold.
do it.
So,
Yes.
he worked it out. Lots of shots to the knee. And that
Yes,
worked out well for
I
him.
love that. The little swoop scan over human casualties, zero point zero.
Also, I loved the point to 0. Like,
Right. What is
is
a
it
point 0.5 human, a
the
point 0.2 human casualty?
right? Is that just like if you're maimed, then it's like a partial, or I don't know. I thought that
Right.
casualties were 1 or 0. Like those had to
Mhm.
be whole numbers, but I'm not a Terminator, so what do I know?
So, one thing that was pretty interesting that this movie weaves in is how endearing this Arnold Terminator becomes over the course of the film. I don't know if you felt that way at all.
Yeah, I want this Arnold Terminator to explain literally everything. Like, there's a scene where he's talking to John and he's like explaining things to him, and he does it in the most like monotone, matter of
Comical
fact,
way.
short sentences. It was amazing. And so I just want to like give like random concepts to him and be like, hey, can you explain this to me? Hey, what is this? Hey, what is that? Like, that would be
Especially, like,
amazing.
abstract concepts about
Yes.
emotions.
Yeah,
I'll get such a hoot out of that.
that would be so fun.
So, that's something that I thought was fun that this movie did, which is it brings back the Terminator of the first movie, but it's now reprogrammed and is on the good side. And we get this other Terminator that is on the bad side, and we get a few shots of them fighting each other. I actually thought that we would get more of that. You know, that you can really capitalize on, like, this whole visual action thrill of
Yeah.
Terminators fighting each other. We get, like, maybe 2, 3 minutes of it in the final 3rd act, but I'm like, "Man, this is juicy," you know? I would love to seen a little bit more of this hand-to-hand combat between the Terminators.
Well, and it was it was also just so funny to me because like Arnold is so much bigger than the other
Yes.
actor. And so it was funny when they would fight and Arnold was losing and I was like, "Wait a second. Like you were this like big bad Terminator in the last movie and now you're not very useful. What is going on here?" But I really I wanted more of those Terminator fights as well. But I am glad that we got to see all that time with the Terminator and John. Just obviously getting to know John and his personality, but it I feel like we needed that time to almost like remind ourselves that this Terminator is good and not bad. Um, because we just spent a whole movie with the Arnold Terminator being the antagonist. So I feel like we needed that time and that investment to go like, oh wait, no, he's a good guy now. We can like him. Okay, now we're getting to know him. Now he's endearing. I feel like we needed to go on that journey uh, because he was the bad guy in the previous movie.
Which I thought that this movie would capitalize on that series of comedies of errors.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a few small moments where the police are like, "It's the same guy that killed blah, blah, blah in 1984." You know, like, I thought that this would be a significant challenge that this Arnold Terminator would have to endure, which is that, you know, they mistaken him for the evil one when he's actually on the side of good. Uh, and we didn't get too much of that, so I was surprised they didn't capitalize on that. That seems like a fun makes for just some fun, thrilling action where we're like, "You got the wrong guy," you know, and that narrative tension of us as the viewers knowing that they're shooting at the wrong person, I think would have been more fun, especially because the evil Terminator is donned in a policeman suit, and so he can easily,
Mm-hmm.
uh assimilate and blend in well with quote unquote the humans that are fighting the wrong Terminator.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been pretty great.
Been fun, right? And then
Yeah.
slowly they realize, like, oh, they've got the wrong person, and then the tides turn.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that would be, that would have been quite fun. I would have liked that in the middle sequence
Right? Somewhere in the middle
rather
where
than
they're like,
some of
oh
the things
wait.
we got.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, I didn't hate this whole Sarah Connor, John Connor storyline as much as I expected to. I think a lot of times when we get this type of movie where we zero in on this like savior figure and spend so much of the plot focused on their journey and protecting them and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, it's interesting in the first movie because we never meet John Connor, right? Like it's this vague future state where there is this savior figure that is leading the rebellion, and I was like, of course, the sequel's going to focus on John Connor. And I expected to hate it a lot more than I did. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out why, but it really did work for me. Um, I was engaged. I was excited to see the way that they make decisions based on the fact that they know that this person, this human, is significant. Like so much of the choices that the Arnold Terminator, and Sarah Connor make in that final climactic scene are focused on um, their knowledge of that, like this kid is important, like we must protect him at all costs. And it worked for me, it really did, and I didn't expect it to. It's like, oh, that was
Mhm.
surprising.
Yeah, yeah, I was surprised too. And I think one of the reasons why it worked for me is cuz John has a fully fledged personality. He's not just this kid, he's not just like a symbol. He
Mm,
he is a three-dimensional character. He is a jacked up, I know that they say that he's 10. He is very much not 10. That child is like 13 for sure. Anyway,
yes.
he's a messed up 10-year-old supposedly who has been through so much, and he also makes his own decisions. We see him making potentially mistakes. We see him being really intelligent and strategic. We also see that he cares about human life because he tells Arnold Terminator not to kill anybody. So like we see all of these really interesting facets of this child, and I think at least for me that is what helped me be willing to go on this journey. I think if John Connor had been like too innocent, then I I don't know that I would have connected with it as well. I think the fact that um, he he breaks the law, like he's stealing money from an ATM in a really ingenious but illegal way. Like he's making these choices that are rebellious. He's breaking laws. He's the bad kid on a motorcycle. And I think at least for me that helped make him feel more human, because I was like, okay, if you've been raised by your mom who has lost her marbles, and you are the savior of the future humanity after an AI takes out the entire world with a nuclear bomb, you would probably have some issues too. And I love that they thought through this character enough to make him not perfect, which helped make the movie more interesting.
So it's the fact that he's this scrappy, full-fledged personality that makes this work.
Yeah, I think
Mm.
so. Because he's not this thin character. He's not this helpless child who needs to be saved. He's not this perfect innocent, like he is a more interesting character than that.
Yeah, because I think that the other version of this is that he doesn't have agency. He doesn't make decisions that
Mhm.
affect the plot. He is just this almost this prop, this object. Like
Yes.
we
Yep.
just need to keep this thing alive because apparently he's going to save humanity. So great, let's make sure we do that. Um and let's cart him around from place to place to make sure that he's safe. Yeah, but Actually, a lot of his decisions impact where he goes, where Arnold Terminator goes with him, and then the colliding with Sarah Connor um, really impacts like the action events that unfold in this movie.
Hmm. Yeah, he makes a lot of decisions. And I
Yeah.
also love that, like, Arnold Terminator tells him, like, no multiple times, and he still goes and does the thing. So it's in these little things where he just, it felt like a real human to me, and not just some object, some character.
Hmm.
And that made it interesting.
And I think the other thing that works is that he is not the fully fledged like leader that he soon becomes. I'm
Hmm.
assuming that the rest of the movies explore him where he is truly leading the rebellion uprising, but I appreciate that this movie doesn't go straight there because I think it's a lot more interesting and exciting for them to explore this middle ground where he's like, apparently I'm going to save all of humanity. Okay. I'm 10. I don't know how to deal with that, but like let me go find my mom. Like um and not jumping too quickly into the future of him as a fully fledged, larger than life, altruistic, righteous leader. I think that's the other version of this series that perhaps they eventually wander over to, but um, he's more interesting when he doesn't know really the stakes yet. I don't think this kid fully gets it yet. The way that the John Connor that we see in that like short little glimpse of the future, that shot of him, in the absolute wasteland, and he's convicted and moody and whatnot. Like I appreciate that we didn't go straight to that John Connor. This was more fun,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'm surprised that this works as well as it does. But
right? Usually I'm like, oh gosh,
right.
there's this prophecy. Now we're gonna go visit the person that
Yeah,
fulfills the prophecy.
yeah. But it works here.
It
I
does.
I I think it's the characters.
I think had the Sarah Connor character not been as strong, the whole John Connor situation would not have been as strong as well.
Yes.
They really
Agreed.
work together well. If Sarah Connor was still the like damsel in distress, but like earnestly trying to save John Connor, this does not work. The fact that she's a badass and convicted, and he has to wrestle with all these things that she's told him that now he realizes true. Like that makes it interesting. There's this dichotomy of there's this innocence of him as the savior, and there's this fierce protector. That's exciting. That dynamic we can get behind. But if they're both just like
Mhm.
earnestly trying to save each other, but they're so incompetent, like, ugh, it's not interesting.
Yeah, and I love that we even see him wrestling with that relationship with his mom, because he, at the beginning, he thinks that she's a basket case and wants nothing to do with her, and hates her. And but he is willing to risk his life in order to make sure that she is okay, that she is safe. And then along the way is like, oh wait, no, there's more here. So I love that we see this kid wrestling through these really complex emotions, these really complex concepts. And we only get a small glimpse into that, but I appreciate the wrestling that we do get to see.
Yeah, I he makes all the wrong decisions.
Oh,
Like he
absolutely.
goes
Yes.
to all of the places that put himself in danger. Um, but we love him for it because there's the heart he has to protect and take care of this person that he doesn't fully understand, honestly. I think that's also relatable. Like he doesn't really understand all of what makes his mom the way that she is, and she is an enigma in a lot of ways. And I think there's something about that that also is working here. That like the alternate version of this that could have gone down this path is that they're so ooey gooey about this like mother son relationship, and I think that that would have just not worked as well. But they're pretty practical. Like she chooses to leave him to go and take down um the dude who creates Skynet. Like she's like, "All
Mhm.
right, bye, son. I've got like a
Yep.
bigger purpose that I need to go chase down." And I love that, you know? Like, yeah, go after Dyson.
Yeah,
We've got
yeah.
bigger things in mind.
It's it's almost like she understands that, like, I mean, obviously she loves her child, but it's it's understanding that there's something bigger there. And so she is also raising a leader. She is raising a soldier. She is raising, this strategic person who has to have this keen military mind in order to outsmart these things. So you can see her very like practical and tactical decisions that she is making to try and instill as many of these things into her son as she can, while also trying to protect herself and him, and potentially trying to save the world from this nuclear event caused by
Mhm.
AI. So I love how like matter of fact and straightforward her thinking seems to be. It's great.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's part of this is that for a story that seems to be so ooey gooey, like there's a mother and a son, and she's protecting him because he's the savior of all of humanity. This film is oddly very matter of fact and very practical. None of the characters are ooey gooey. They've got their little moments. But for the most part, this is not like a tug on your heartstrings story about family and mother child relationship, It, every character is focused on this larger purpose and the 3 billion people that are at stake. And I think
Hmm.
that's what's refreshing.
Yeah,
They
and
try and tug on our heartstrings and manipulate us to be like, "Oh my gosh, this mother and this son," you know?
yeah,
It's great.
and I think it's also part of that whole like, if you are being chased by this evil cyborg who has no flaws or weaknesses, you're probably going to be pretty focused on the task at hand and not have a lot of time for, that mushy stuff. So it's also nice to see an action movie that is like, nope, we're just going to be to the point. We're going to be focused on what we need to be focused on, and all of that emotional crap is irrelevant because we are just trying to survive and we're trying to make sure that humanity survives. And it was
Yes.
nice. It was nice to
Yep.
have that level of focus.
Yeah. They got no time to waste. Like reconciling or talking about, your father and the one night that we
Yeah.
had. No, like we got a plan.
Yeah, man, we don't have time for feelings. We're on the run.
Yeah.
It's great.
So one thing that I was surprising to me is that I was predicting that Sarah Connor would go and die in this movie, and Homegirl does not die. I thought they were definitely gonna go that route. Like her tenacity, her
Mhm.
dedication to save her son and not give away his location, like that's gonna be what she ultimately sacrifices herself for her son, the savior of the world. And I'm surprised she doesn't die.
Yeah. Uh, I think maybe the only reason, or maybe not the only, but like one of the reasons why I didn't go down that route is because I knew Linda Hamilton was in
Oh,
one of the
later
recent
movies.
sequels,
Okay.
and so that really didn't cross my brain.
Mm,
But that's interesting. They very easily could have gone that route.
yes,
It was right there, ready for them to take it.
especially when evil Terminator's like, call his name,
Yes. Yeah.
and he's got the blade right at her. I'm like, this is where she'll give herself over for the cause, for her son, for
Hmm.
humanity,
Yep.
and it's in line with who she is as a character. She would do that. I'd buy it any day.
Yeah.
She would do that.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Mhm.
And she doesn't.
She doesn't? No?
She survives
Wait,
somehow.
so she's in so many other movies?
I know she's in at least one more. Like one of the more
Wow.
recent ones, like that was
Okay.
part of the promo was like, "Oh my gosh, she came back." Terminator, what is this? Terminator Dark Fate that
Oh,
came out
okay.
in 2019. She is in it as Sarah Connor.
Okay.
I
Hmm.
think that might be the only other one that she's in as I quickly scroll through her IMDb filmography.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I because we know that the other movies have not performed as well as these, I really wonder how they build this storyline. I was surprised actually that this movie is pretty tame in world building. We don't really learn too much more new information about what happens in the future, um, the two factions that are in contention. We don't learn too much more, and I kind of love that. I think so many times sequels try and expand the universe that we knew, and this movie's not really interested in that. Like, there's definitely this new Terminator that has some new powers, which I'm curious your thoughts on. Uh, but as far as the events that unfold in the future, it's still pretty vague about it. And I kind of appreciated that it didn't try and do too much.
Yeah, it is a pretty simple story. And it does it, effectively enough. Um, yeah, I am impressed that they didn't go bigger. And I don't know, the like as much as I want to know about this whole world, like I don't know, part of me wants to like jump into the future because I want to understand adult John Connor and what's going on there and how is he leading and and why is he making these choices and why isn't he equipping the people that are going back in time better? Like I have questions about future John Connor, but I like that this movie isn't it doesn't care. It's like no, that's not
No.
what's important.
Yeah.
We are in this one little moment and that's it.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And in a when it's so tempting in a sequel to be ambitious about building this world, I love the level of restraint that this movie has to know what made the first movie great and honestly just serve it to us again, in a lot of the same ways. Like, there's so much that's similar structurally about the first movie and this movie. Like, there are these 2 Terminators that are sent back in time. Well, one's not a Terminator, I guess, in the first movie. Reeves is technically isn't a Terminator, but there's a protector and a foe. They're both sent back in time. They both appear. We get the first intersection of them, gathering their bearings, getting their clothes, preparing themselves to find their targets. They find their targets. The targets misconstrue their intentions. Like, structurally, it honestly follows so much of the same formula. And that's pretty, uh, I mean, I'd be curious what sequels at the time look like, but for the sequels of today, there's a lot of restraint in committing to doing the same structure again and trusting that there's entertainment of value enough in that structure that people are going to come and just want to see these people fight each other with these new Terminator powers that have arisen.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on these new Terminator
Yes.
powers?
See, I go back to your comment earlier, which is I think the powers are interesting when ultimately our protagonists know how to fight them. They understand the powers, and then they can outsmart the powers. That's what makes the powers interesting. You know? Like, when they feel so insurmountable and like our protagonists also don't understand the powers, then I'm like, well, now I just am like, okay, so he can do anything apparently. And every time you think that you've destroyed him, you haven't because he just, his little water pellets or whatever metal pellets just like ooze together again. I think that the powers become more engaging when we understand them more fully. But it was entertaining enough. It was entertaining enough.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought the powers were super cool. I just wanted the the enhanced powers to have a very clear weakness, like nothing is invincible. Everything has to have a weakness, and we never learn what this one's weakness is because if you're like fully metal and then you're able to like disintegrate into like a metal puddle and then you reconstitute as a person again, like there has to be some drawbacks in there somewhere. So I just wish that they had written it in that he had a clear weakness that Arnold Terminator was aware of. And so then they could try and find a way to exploit the weakness. Or if Arnold didn't know coming in, at least they could like discover the weakness over time. I feel like that would have made it a lot more interesting because to me, it really felt like they just kind of lucked into beating the T1000, and that's not satisfying to me. Like I especially because Sarah Connor is smart and she's scrappy and she's strategic. And so I wanted her with a Terminator sidekick to be able to come up with a really solid plan to take out this other Terminator. But instead, they just kind of fumble into it and ta-da,
See, I
T1000 is
think that,
dead.
and I think we bring up an interesting point, which is that it would have been interesting to see the way that the Terminator as a machine is able to think in that lens where it's constantly taking in input. It's constantly observing its foes in order to figure out how to exploit. Like part of what we know about Skynet and these AI machines are that they're smart. The Arnold Terminator says himself, like, the more that I'm around humans, the more human I become because he's constantly taking in new information that he can aggregate together and be able to draw insights from. So I wonder if they exploit this a little bit more in the later movies, but this idea that everything that your foe reacts to in some way is information for you as the other side to fight against them. Like, ooh, they took longer to recover when we shot them with this thing, or when they're in the presence of cold or of nitrogen. What I don't know, remember whatever that scene was. Like, this is how they react. How do we disperse their parts? It like every detail is input for their little machinery to spit out new insights that we can learn from and use.
Mhm.
And then it's a battle of like which Terminator is smarter and faster in its learning. And that'd be fun.
Yeah. So we wanted a brain over brawn movie.
Yeah, we did. Which is not the
This
series
is
so
not
far.
this movie. I was so frustrated when I saw that truck that he was driving was the liquid nitrogen truck. And I was
Yeah.
like, are you kidding me? So like you're going to defeat this dude just because he happened to drive the liquid nitrogen truck when he was chasing
Yep.
you and you just happened to go into like a steel factory? Like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
I was so annoyed.
I think that's why this third act falls so flat. It's because so many of their choices are not strategic. They're kind of happenstance. I would argue that the third act in the first movie, those two protagonists, um, I think Reeves is his name, Reeves and Sarah O'Connor, they use a lot of their clever cunning and their quick reflexes to make a lot of like cool, interesting choices to use the factory to take down the Terminator. This one, honestly, I'm like, y'all got lucky. There happens to be this lava pit of fire beneath
Yeah.
you that he just happens to tumble in. Like, and actually, what I was waiting for is that that was not the end. Like he would
Yeah.
rise from the fire pit.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't.
Yeah,
He
'cause
doesn't.
again, it wasn't set up how you kill the T-1000. You don't
Mhm.
know. And so he just survived being broken to bits by liquid nitrogen. And
Yeah,
so why would you think that being melted down in a lava pit would work? You know? We
right.
don't know the temperatures of that. We don't know how he melts. We don't know if he will just magically melt back together again. I feel like it part of it wasn't satisfying because we didn't know if it would work. So we didn't feel a
Mm,
clear victory there either.
mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, even when the ending was unfolding, I was unsure if it was really the end.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
very true. Okay. Other thoughts about Terminator 2?
How did you feel about the Arnold Terminator becoming more human?
It was so endearing. I don't know how they do it. That actually was one of my thoughts is like their ability to get me so emotionally invested in this machine is incredible. You know? Like I know that he doesn't feel pain when he's getting shot at, but I feel like he's in pain.
Mm,
Like when he was
mhm.
walking towards the policeman, just like willingly getting shot at, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's willing to go in the line of fire to protect these people. And I'm like, oh wait, he doesn't feel pain. Cognitively, I'm like, he doesn't feel pain. But emotionally, I'm like, he's willing to endure this like curtain of bullets to protect his people. I mean, I think anytime you get like a young boy who's missing a father figure, like a male figure, and you have someone that has like somehow filled that void for him in some way, it is like you just are like invested, like you can't help but root for this relationship. And um I think so much of why Arnold Terminator is endearing is because of his interactions with John, which I think you brought up as a point earlier, which is that the movie spends so much time giving us their interactions and their relationship together, which is really smart for us to really be invested in him by the time we get to the third act.
Mhm. And it's also this kind of cute. I know it's not like a buddy cop situation, but it's in that
Mm,
vein.
yeah.
These two are so opposite from each other, and they have these like this cute little playful banter, and like one is smarter in some things and the other is smarter in other things, and you see their teamwork, you see their disagreements. Like it was just a really good rapport between the two, uh, which was just fun to watch. And so then that makes you like Arnold Terminator even more.
I think that's what makes this movie so fun. Amidst all of the cat and mouse stuff, which is fine, it's law of diminishing return from the first movie, but um, so much of it is like the joy this movie has and the fun that this movie has and all of those little moments. Like every time John Connor is trying to teach Arnold Terminator a new lingo, it's just so endearing. How could you not get behind that, you know? Hasta
So good.
luego, baby.
Yeah. I wanted to see so many more of those things.
Mhm.
Like it was just great. Can we get a whole blooper reel of John Connor just teaching Arnold Terminator whatever? That'd be
Yeah.
great.
He's simultaneously so childlike, but also like an old person where you're just like teach him all the new lingo, you know? Like, and so willing to learn. Like, okay, cool. No problemo, dickwad.
Yeah. It's so good cuz
So great.
like it's just fun to think of it as him as an AI because he, like you said before, he's just processing data, and that's it. Like he doesn't know how to distinguish these different pieces of data, so everything gets the same response. It's great.
Well, that's an interesting moment that's woven into the third act and that emotional scene where he gives himself over to the lava pit. It's not
Yes.
lava, it's
Yeah.
fire because it's not
Whatever.
emanating from a volcano. But whatever. It looks like a lava pit to me because it's bubbling. Um, but he says to John Connor, he says, like, I will never know why you cry, which is almost like this cutting off of the relationship. Like, as much as you think that I am this human male figure in your life, like I am still an AI, you know? And it's the kindness that he has for John Connor to cut off those ties, to be like, "No, I will never understand you. Like, we are, still fundamentally different." And I thought that was just like, oh, so gut-wrenching, but wise. But wise
Hmm.
for him to say.
And I'm impressed that they killed off Arnold Terminator
Mm,
because John Connor had a whole extra robot hand in his backpack that he could have
mhm,
figured out how to attach to Arnold Terminator.
mhm.
So like when his arm got cut off, I was like, "Oh, we got a spare. Like you're good, dude. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. We'll reattach it. You'll be great." Uh, but they didn't go that route, and they destroyed
No.
everything in the not lava pit. And I appreciated that choice because I feel like the sentimental ending is, oh, but now we've bonded and you're a good AI, so you can stick around. But this movie went, nope, he's got to die too.
Yeah, but they'll just spawn another one,
Oh, absolutely, they're a dime a
but it won't be
dozen.
this one.
Yeah.
Won't be this one. Yes. Yes, this is true. All right. Any other last thoughts about Terminator 2 Judgment Day?
There was this one line that I really loved.
Oh, yeah? Which one?
When there was a few good ones, but the exchange between John Connor and the Terminator when John says, "We're not going to make it, are we? People, I mean." And the Terminator says, "It's in your nature to destroy yourselves." And John's response is, "Yeah, major drag, huh?" I was like, there's so much
Yes.
like profound truth in
Yes.
that, and it's this
I
huge
loved
gut
that.
punch, but then it's because of how it's delivered between these two characters, it's also this really funny moment. It was just a great piece of writing.
That was really great. Yes. Which is what comedy does well. You know, you're like,
Yes.
"Oh, that hits real close to home, but also I'm
Yeah.
laughing now, and also I can choose to engage with this or not." But dang,
Yep.
yeah,
That's great.
that was really great. There was a lot of moments like that. Um, I think that's one of the interesting things about having this like AI Terminator character is that they inherently can observe us as humanity with a far more objective lens than we can ourselves, you know, and point out things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, those hard truths that we don't
Mhm.
want to think about.
Why is your face wet? Why do you do that?
Oh, it was so good.
But like honestly, I don't know. You know, like none of us know.
And it
Just
was,
a emotional reaction.
yeah, it was so good
Can't
to watch
explain.
a child try and explain it too.
Hmm.
And then watching this and going, you know what? I don't think I'd have a better answer.
Right. I was like, I honestly don't know how to answer this question either. It
Yeah.
just does, which is what John Connor says.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Such a
Yeah.
human response.
Hmm. All right. Well, this is our review and discussion of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. You're going to find it available to stream on HBO Max for just a little while longer before I think it's moving off the platform and probably moving on to some other place where it is hosted. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. Everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you hung out with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a review letting us know your thoughts about Terminator 2 Judgment Day. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at @moviesandUsPod, or you can email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week for an exciting rewatch of the movie Tar, a movie that we both loved and we're excited to revisit again. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you very soon.